Adolf Hitler's campaign against the Jews is well known, but was Hitler actually of Jewish descent himself? And was his crusade against the Jews really aimed at his own roots? That claim has been made several times since Hitler took his own life in a bunker beneath Berlin in the final days of World War II. But now, we finally have clarity on whether this was just a persistent myth or if there might actually be some truth to it. With Soviet forces advancing to Potsdamer Platz, just about a kilometer from the bunker where Hitler had his headquarters in Berlin, and after learning the day before that his ally, Benito Mussolini, had been summarily executed by Italian partisans, with both Mussolini and his mistress, Clara Petacci, strung up by their heels, then cut down, thrown into the gutter, and mocked by Italian dissidents, Hitler made the final decisions of his life. Between 3 and 4 p.m. on April 30th, he and Eva Braun, his wife of less than 40 hours, took their own lives. Eva died by cyanide poisoning, while Hitler used a combination of cyanide and a gunshot to the head.
Now, researchers analyzing DNA have uncovered the real link between Adolf Hitler and the alleged Jewish ancestry, along with other intriguing facts about him. They obtained the DNA sample from a blood-stained piece of fabric cut from the sofa in the Berlin bunker where Hitler died on the 30th of April, 1945. The research, which took more than 4 years to complete, was led by geneticist Turi King, a professor at the UK's University of Bath, who is best known for identifying the remains of King Richard III. To ensure the blood was really Hitler's, the team compared the Y chromosome from that sample to that of a known male line relative of Hitler. The match confirmed the sample belonged to the same male lineage. Genetic experts examined available DNA evidence and concluded that there is no credible genetic indication that Hitler had Jewish roots. The idea that Hitler might have had Jewish ancestry actually dates back to the 1920s and 30s, when Hitler's rise to power sparked intense curiosity and suspicion from both his enemies and occasionally his allies. One of the earliest sources was Hans Frank, Hitler's personal lawyer and later Nazi governor of occupied Poland. After the war, Frank claimed he had investigated Hitler's family background and discovered that his paternal grandfather might have been Jewish. But historians have long dismissed these claims as speculative and unreliable, likely a post-war attempt by Frank to sensationalize his memoirs or deflect guilt. Still, the story stuck. And during World War II, it wasn't just a whispered rumor. It was also used deliberately as psychological warfare. Allied propaganda sometimes repeated or hinted at the idea that Hitler had Jewish roots, not because there was strong evidence, but because it was a powerful way to ridicule Nazi ideology. Imagine the Führer of the so-called Aryan master race being, in the eyes of his own regime, racially impure. It was an attempt to expose the hypocrisy, humiliate him publicly, and even create paranoia inside the Nazi ranks, especially given how obsessed they were with racial purity. Over time, the combination of rumor, post-war memoirs, and propaganda turned the idea into one of the most persistent myths surrounding Hitler's life. The documentary team referenced in the article analyzed mitochondrial DNA markers and compared them across relevant population groups. Their findings pointed away from the claim of Jewish descent, effectively putting this persistent myth to rest. But how can DNA be used to explore such ancestry questions, despite the fact that being Jewish is not a race in the biological sense? DNA tests allow researchers to trace maternal and paternal lineages through specific genetic markers, such as mitochondrial DNA or Y chromosome variants, which can be statistically associated with populations of different ancestral backgrounds. These methods don't determine religion or identity. Rather, they provide clues about population history and migration. In Hitler's case, the clear Y chromosome match to a known relative indicated the lineage belonged to his paternal line, and the absence of markers commonly found in Jewish-linked maternal lines suggested his lineage did not align with the claim of Jewish ancestry. Finally, they looked into potential psychological hereditary material. The analysis suggested that Hitler may have had genetic predispositions associated with several psychiatric or neurodevelopmental conditions. These included schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and autism spectrum disorder. However, the researchers were very clear. This is not proof that he suffered from any of these conditions, only that he may have been genetically more vulnerable to them. A genetic predisposition means that someone carries certain variants in their DNA that can increase the likelihood of developing specific conditions, but it does not guarantee that the person will actually develop them, nor does it explain or excuse their behavior. It simply highlights a possible biological susceptibility that, in combination with environment and experience, might play a role in shaping mental health. In summary, recent DNA analysis has helped debunk the long-standing myth of Adolf Hitler's alleged Jewish ancestry. The blood sample used, taken from the sofa where he died in his Berlin bunker, was verified through a match with a known living male relative. Genetic markers showed no credible link to Jewish heritage. Beyond ancestry, the analysis also explored Hitler's potential psychological predispositions. Professor Dita de Montis and her research team applied what's known as a polygenic risk score test, a method that combines the influence of many common genetic variants into a single number to estimate the likelihood of developing psychiatric conditions. By comparing Hitler's score to those of 37,000 people from the general population, the team found something remarkable. To understand what the researchers actually discovered about Hitler's mental health vulnerabilities, we first need to look at the method they used. So what exactly is a polygenic risk score? Think of it like a kind of genetic weather forecast. Instead of predicting sunshine or rain, it estimates how likely someone is to develop certain conditions, like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, based on their DNA. Here's how it works. Scientists look at thousands of tiny variations scattered throughout a person's genome. Each one might slightly increase the risk of a condition. On their own, these variations don't reveal much, but when you add them all together, you get a single score, the polygenic risk score. Hitler ranked in the top 1% for genetic risk of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and autism spectrum disorder, higher than any other individual in the comparison group across all three conditions. As Professor de Montis put it, he stands out extremely from the general population. It's important to note, however, that a high polygenic risk score is not a diagnosis. It indicates a greater possibility of developing a condition, not a certainty, and it does not determine behavior. But this kind of research provides new insight into the biological complexity of individuals, even historical figures whose lives have been intensely studied for decades. Be sure to check out our other historical documentaries for more surprising, strange, and thought-provoking stories from the past. There's a lot more history waiting for you.